Go on and subscribe to the channel before we begin, because honestly, what saved my soil from winter damage was not some modern input, not a purchased amendment, and certainly not a shortcut. It was, in fact, an old fermentation practice that predates industrial agriculture and was once common wherever people understood that soil does not sleep through winter. It starves. This method, you see, revived frozen ground, preserved nutrients, and carried fertility across seasons when most land quietly declines. Winter nearly killing soil is not dramatic language, not at all. It is biological reality. When temperatures drop, microbial activity slows, organic matter just stops cycling, and exposed soil begins losing structure. Nutrients leach downward with winter rains, and by spring, soil may look intact, but behaves dead. Historical farmers knew this problem well. They did not wait for spring to rebuild fertility. They fermented it through winter. Why ancient farmers relied on fermentation instead of decomposition is the key distinction here. Decomposition requires oxygen and warmth, and winter, well, provides neither. Fermentation works without both. By sealing organic material away from air, farmers preserved nutrients in a stable form until conditions allowed soil life to wake again. This was not preservation for storage alone. It was preservation for soil survival. The fermentation trick that changed everything is what we now recognize as controlled anaerobic breakdown of organic matter, kind of like those old kitchen waste pits, silage trenches, and fermented manure systems. These practices existed across cultures long before they had names. The logic was simple, really. If the land cannot digest nutrients now, store them in a form it can use later. So, how this method works biologically explains why it succeeds where compost fails in winter. Fermentation is driven by lactic acid-producing microbes that, stabilize organic matter instead of breaking it down completely. This locks nutrients in place without volatilization or leaching. When fermented material is later exposed to soil, microbial communities shift, acids neutralize, and decomposition resumes rapidly. The first step in applying this old method is collecting winter-bound organic waste before it can rot or wash away. Kitchen scraps, spent garden plants, chopped weeds, manure, and even grain residues were traditionally used. These materials were layered into sealed containers or pits and compacted tightly just to remove air. Moisture was present but controlled. Too dry halted fermentation. Too wet caused spoilage. Historically, vessels ranged from clay jars to wooden barrels to earth-lined pits. Today, any sealable container works if it prevents airflow. Once sealed, the material is left alone. No turning, no monitoring. Over weeks, fermentation begins. The smell shifts from rot to sour, which was historically the signal of success. Now, why this preserved soil fertility through winter isn't just some sort of theory. Fermented material, you see, holds on to its nitrogen rather than letting it escape as gas. Potassium, well, it stays soluble. And those trace minerals? They're bound up into organic acids instead of just getting washed away. So, when spring finally arrived, farmers didn't go spreading raw waste about. Instead, they put the fermented material straight back into the soil, where it broke down quickly and safely. Applying fermented matter back to the soil, that follows another old rule, one that, honestly, modern guides often seem to skip. It's never left exposed, not ever. Fermented inputs are either buried just under the surface, or they're covered with a bit of soil or mulch. This stops nutrients from being lost and lets the soil organisms reclaim the material, bit by bit. In that cold, early spring soil, this really jumpstarts biological activity, weeks ahead of what plain old compost would manage. Let me give you a practical example, just to make this a bit clearer. If you bury fermented kitchen waste between your garden rows in late winter, it actually starts to warm the soil right there as the microbes get back to work. Roots will naturally grow toward it. The soil itself darkens up quicker. Plants experience less stress during those early days of growth. And really, this isn't about feeding the plants directly. It's about feeding the soil itself at the very moment it wakes up. In container systems, fermented material must be used carefully, but it works exceptionally well. Just small amounts mixed into soil and allowed to neutralize for a short period that really prevents acidity issues. Ancient growers understood moderation, and, fermentation concentrates the effect. Too much of it, though, overwhelms the balance. Why this method fell out of favour is tied, really, to modern convenience. Fermentation requires patience, containment and planning across seasons. Compost piles fit modern rhythms better, but they tend to fail under winter conditions. Ancient land management accepted that fertility must be carried forward deliberately, not rebuilt repeatedly from scratch. This fermentation trick also protected soil structure. Because organic matter was stabilized, it did not collapse into sludge under winter rains. When returned to soil, it improved aggregation rather than disrupting it. This matters for erosion control, root oxygenation, and water infiltration. The most important lesson here is philosophical. Winter was never treated as downtime in historical husbandry. It was a storage phase. Nutrients harvested during abundance were preserved through scarcity. Fermentation was the bridge. What this practice ultimately restores is continuity. Soil does not reset every spring. It remembers how it was treated through winter. When nutrients are protected instead of lost, spring growth becomes stronger without external inputs. If this kind of historically grounded, no-nonsense land logic matters to you, subscribe to the channel and share this with someone who believes winter kills soil beyond repair. The old systems endured because they planned for seasons, not just harvests, and that knowledge still works today.